Hello everyone, my name is Jay Martin. Whoa, where'd we go? We're playing Napoleon. It's a 1v1. We're on the Prussian Hills map. This game was sent to me by a player named Yo-Yo Vago. And a couple of videos ago, I did a game with Vago playing in it, but I very embarrassingly got the players backwards. So the way I narrated the game, like I had Vago losing the game when in fact he won the game. And I felt really bad about that, and that maybe I owed this dude a favor. It just so happens, he emailed me another replay and he said, hey, this is one that I actually did lose, and I'm really curious. I can't figure out why. Would you maybe watch it and give your thoughts? And I thought, yes, absolutely, because I feel bad and I feel like I owe you a favor. And the least I can do is take an hour to watch your game. And this was kind of an interesting game anyway, so it kind of makes for a good video. So that's where we're at. Vago is playing a 1v1 on Prussian Hills against an opponent who is Danish. And Denmark starts really narrow over there. I want to make a couple points before we get into the meat of the game. The first is the easiest way to win games. Well, first of all, when you're analyzing Napoleon games or StarCraft games or whatever, it's not necessarily things that you actively did, like we can do dumb stuff like fail to square or whatever. But more often it's, what am I not doing? And this is relative to what your opponent is doing at the time. But the bigger question is, what am I not doing? All right. The second thing is the easiest way to win Napoleon games is to have two units shooting on one. And the converse of that is how you lose games more often than not. So whenever I watch replays, I really like to keep a close eye on, two units just shot on one. Like that's how you generate advantage in these games. A note on the army builds, Vago here's France has 7 cav. There's 6 shooter cav and 1 lancer. That seems like a lot to me. And then there are 2 young guards, and then he has 3 lights. On the converse, Denmark over here has 7 light dragoons. Again, I feel like that's a lot of cav. But then he has 4 guard line and only 1 light. So I think that in between having 2 more guards and having 2 less lights, the Danish infantry is going to be a little more beefy. It's just going to have a little more men to work with, a little bit margin of error. And unless Vago really makes good use of the extra 2 lights, then I think that the infantry bit will favor Denmark. With the cav, I think it's a real weird. I think having 6-shooter cav can be a very, very powerful tool if you're using them to get behind and on the flanks. And a lot of times I'll play a game where I bring a bunch of shooter cav and then I just wind up using them as if they were light dragoons. And I feel like I left a lot of value on the table. So one of the things we can start out with talking about is what did we not do? Did we use our shooter cav as light dragoons? And if you wind up doing that, then you left some value on the table. And that's something to think about as the game commences. It starts, again, Denmark's really narrow. They're only, the minimap helps here. They're only occupying half of the field. And both players are kind of pushing their cav up to the front here. I'm trying to click in a fast forward. There we go. Okay. And so Vago's kind of arranging like this. And it seems to me that Vago's just content to concede the hill. One thing I really like to see players do is form a straight line. That's just a really good place to start. I think that if we gave away some casualties, the shooter cav peaked there. We did give away some casualties. That adds up over the course of the game, but I really like to see players get in a straight line. A couple reasons for this. If you're in a straight line, it's impossible to get flanked, so you can't really get into trouble. But what can happen to you is if for some reason the game develops really rapidly, it's easy to get disorganized. You maybe forget these units are back here. And I really like having, all your units just up here ready to go and in position to become an active piece on the board. Again, we give away some casualties here. Denmark squares. All right, so that isn't great. I mean, we would prefer to have our cav units of full strength. We give away, a charge worth of soldiers. I guess we're going to watch this from Denmark's perspective for a bit. Yeah, Denmark is really pushing all in. I guess an important terrain feature is this rock, which does split this hill in half. And what I think a lot of players fail to realize is there is a bunch of space over here. Like the red line isn't till there. So you can flank around and make use of that space. Denmark comes up on top of the hill. I think my comment right now would, if Vago just isn't active, like nobody's moving. Okay, we're moving these guys here. That's good. But just not a whole lot of units are moving right now. I think a sign of a good player is you just move a lot. Are we getting shut up again? We're going to take some hits. Okay, we're moving the lights up to shoot. That's something. You know, we're not moving back here. You know, let's push up, put a line here. Let's trickle somebody out here. Let's try to get some reactions out of our opponent, right? And another useful skill is if you're moving at multiple places on the map, that's generating opportunities for your opponents to make mistakes, like to not react to your movement. So I think when in doubt, movement is generally a good idea. I think the Volts are going to get some good shots. Another big theme, I watched this game once, zooming in a lot, and both players were really struggling with line of sight. Oh, we're going to put stakes up. That's probably smart. But there were, see, how many of these bullets are, okay, this is probably okay. But when you play on these terrain maps, you really got to make sure that you guys are not shooting dirt. And you have to be really diligent with checking that and turning firewall on and off. I want to say Vago was better at this than his opponent was in this game, but it did happen a bit on both sides. And so the opponent's kind of reacting to this move. And I like this. The opponent is so narrow. Why not? Let's take an opportunity to exploit that. We can move at the same time. You know, what are these guys doing? You know, let's move around here. Maybe is something we can do, or we can present a straight line. Another reason I really like a straight line right there is it makes it basically impossible for your opponent to come over the top of the hill. If you leave a couple units like this kind of isolated on their own, then yeah, somebody can crawl around their flank like this rifle is sort of right now and kind of peck away at you. If you're in a straight line, nothing real bad can happen. I'm not sure about the positioning of these Volts. I think what he's thinking is if the dude comes over the crest of the hill, he can, you know, have a shot there, but I'm not sure the line of sight works out. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. So Vago, this is a Young Guard and a Swiss, but the opponent's reacting. See, we've got, so Vago throws 2 units there. The opponent's got, what, 4 coming over? 5, 6? These dudes aren't doing anything. Okay, so I think we're gonna have a fight here. I would really like, now, generally I say you don't want cav in your enemy's rear. Normally it's a waste of time. The kind of exception to that is when you have 6 shooter cav. That's kind of maybe when you want to think about doing that, especially shooter cav v light dragoons. You can get some good advantages there if you can kind of goad them into, you know, the light dragoons charging. You know, say 4 units of shooter cav versus 4 units of light dragoons. You know, a very common thing is the light dragoon player would charge all 4 at one shooter cav, the other 3 retire, then they get shots off. The shooter cav will generally win that fight. So one thing we could be doing here, that we probably should be doing here, is having our cav be active, you know, in the back. You have an advantage over the light dragoon, I think, in that scenario is another way you could be opening the game up. And I mean, yeah, I guess we mentioned this earlier, because if you don't do that, you're probably just going to be using your shooter cav as hussars, right? Which is not what you want. You should have just brought hussars if that was your plan. And I mean, because a couple of shooter cav over here would make this interesting, because then you would be able to come through here and you would make this advance really tricky for the Danish player, right? I mean, think about the presence of a handful of shooter cav here. This makes Denmark's position very awkward. And it really makes your flanking movement a lot stronger if you have a little anchor down here that can dart in. This unit kind of can't be there. You probably trade out with these two. And again, this is the only thing that's happening. You know, we're not being active anywhere else. We got some shots going in the dirt here, for definite. Okay, here we go. This is interesting. So Vago wanted to talk about this. There's a charge, and I'm going to hold down the dot so you can see where the cav are actually going. Line starts moving back. The cav aren't actually targeting the unit yet. He's actually just giving them move orders. So the cav are not going to charge because he sees the square happening. So the cav are going to come down here. This lifeguard is currently at 119. Now, that's the charge order into the lifeguard. Second cav still at home right now. Okay, there's the order. A weird thing happens in that the collision doesn't... What I think happened is you would expect that right there, the Lancers would actually collide with the unit. But somehow the timing of the game worked up. You can tell that the lifeguard has been given a move order to send it down here. The lifeguard started moving right at the millisecond before the cav were going to actually collide or contact with the unit. I think this is all kind of legit. It's just really weird timing. Vago's very concerned. He actually put up a little clip of this little snippet. I think it's just really weird timing. So the cav, their pathing is now messed up because the lifeguard started moving. And like this unit just isn't colliding with... Did we get one? Okay, actually we just died. So we get some, and we're making some impact, but the charge bonus of the shooter cav is small enough that they're not actually killing the soldiers. So what happens is this individual... oh, these are Lancers. They should be... I don't know. Maybe the movement is disrupting the charge bonus from the Lancer. Initially, my apology, I thought initially this is a shooter cav. But what Vago's saying is there should have been a lot more casualties happening to lifeguard. Now, some are. We're down to 108. So the Lancer and the shooter are getting some hits, but the charge of the Lancer, because of the timing of the movement of the lifeguard, just never got a real clean collision according to the game engine, is kind of what happened. And I agree, this is a very odd 1 in 1,000 thing. But I agree with Vago. I would have expected a much better hit with the lifeguard, but I think just the timing of the movement disrupted the collision math of when the Lancer should have contacted, is what happened. That is interesting. Might be worth going to watch that again in slow-mo. And here comes the charge Vago squares. In the course of this maneuver, regardless of what happened to the lifeguard, who are down to 92, so this wasn't a complete bug in the game. The cav did make some contact down to 87, okay. But they kind of probably took some hits from light dragoons, probably some overflow bullets there. The price of this is both of these cav do get chewed up by the fire by the line infantry. And then I think we just had a cav on cav thing right there. So that's kind of what happened. So in the process, I think we're going to lose a third cav unit in this. The cav is kind of getting attritioned away without having much of an impact. Here we go again. Are they still in the square? I guess it's there now. Okay, Vago cancels the charge. Denmark gets to save. Everybody gets to save their cav here. And what are we down to? 115, that's good. 104. Again, through that whole thing, nobody's moving over here. All right. And I would really love Vago. I mean, he can't because he's fighting up an elevation. An elevation. And if he crested the hill with these volts, he get peppered. But the volts aren't having an impact, or the extra 2 lights France aren't making an impact. And in this case, I just rather have line infantry. And again, Denmark only has the 1 light, so they have 2 extra line infantry. So I think the longer the game goes without the volts having an impact, begins to edge towards Denmark a little bit. Are we hitting the ground? No, here come the cav again. All right. Both of Vago's units square. Ooh, he gets a hit in there. And this should be good. That was pretty good. That was about 30 casualties. That's not bad for a charge into guards. Lancers probably should have been pulled out after that. Again, they go in and run into a square. So again, we just lost the cav unit. So we're down 4 now. Maybe 5 without having a huge impact. And then a real telling thing in the game kind of happens. A real telling thing. So let's draw a line right here because these volts are facing this direction. Vago has 1, 2, 3, 4 units in this section of the field. Denmark has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if we draw an imaginary line, I'm not counting the general, it's 7v4 here. Right? And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 against 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I want to say there were 12. Yeah, there's 12. So if we draw an imaginary line here, Vago's an advantage of 12v11 here, but a disadvantage of 7v4 here. Right? So I've made this comment in countless games, but if this continues, Denmark's going to win this. It's 7v4. Right? Let's ignore tactics and missing squares or hitting squares. 7v4, Denmark's going to win. So if the state of the game remains, Denmark's going to win. So Vago really needs to become active over here. And, these units, another problem is these units back here are 2 steps away from participating in the game. So I say you need to keep your pieces active, meaning they need to be able to threaten the board. It's better if they're threatening the board directly, but an indirect threat is also good. However, in order to even do that, these units would have to be kind of on a line up here. But instead, we're way back here, so we're 2 steps behind. Vago would have to make step 1, get everybody up here. Okay, now we're in a position to potentially become active, and then we'd have to make the second move of figure out how we want to make them active. So these dudes being back here are 2 steps away from participating in the game, which is bad. And then what we're really interested in is what's going to happen. Ooh, another one is coming over. So now we're going to be, I guess, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And it's really 5 line against 2. If you don't count the cav, all the cav is pretty low. Right? So Vago says, how did I lose this game? I'm thinking, well, I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking, well, this is happening, and this isn't, is what I'm thinking. And in some situations, it's better to analyze your games from the big picture stuff. Like we can obsess over, oh, I missed a square there. Or, I shot in the dirt for that volley. But this big picture thing, I think is where it's at. Oh, and we're pushing more cav over here. So, Denmark's really trying to make this happen. And it looks fine for Vago now because he has 2 fairly good quality units. But it's kind of one of those things you have to think, okay, well, what if one of these units died? What would things look like there? Now, I like that. The shooter cav actually shot, so we got some value out of them being shooter cav. I feel like these are kind of defensive cav movements by Vago also. We don't have an advantage that we're trying to press upon. Like, the best way to use cav is when you already have an advantage to use the cav to get further ahead. When you're ahead, what do? Get further ahead is the answer. So now we're at that scenario where the unit there is routed and it looks really bad because now we're down to a young guard at half strength. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 infantry. Right? So this looks real bad because Denmark simply pushed more units. I guess we did turn the volts around, so that's good. General comment, the volts just really didn't use their voltiness to determine the game, I don't think. And yeah, once this happens, we're at a situation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So now we're 15v12. And it seems like both players are relatively even skill. If it's 15v12, 15 is going to win 90% of the time. If we're playing poker here, this is, pocket aces against pocket tens. The aces are going to win the vast majority of the time. And, we still haven't done anything. We haven't attempted to impact the game at all with all these units. There is a guard unit over there that hasn't really had a say in how the game's going to come over. And I would predict from this point that Denmark is doing the right thing. They're like, okay, I have more people, so now I'm going to start moving them. And temporarily, Vago gets in trouble. The general's out of position. We don't have a straight line ready to move this. And a good point is Denmark's advancing in a really poor fashion. Like, if you had a straight line here, you could really punish this because, there's a weird kink. There's an angle you could work. Maybe we could be over here. Maybe we could be right here and have a good shot. So not having your army in a line really limits, what if you're in a straight line, you could instantly just spring an action and go to work. But again, we're 2 steps behind back here. Like, these dudes would have to make step A. Let's get in line. Okay, now then, what kind of interesting tactical move do we want to make to find an angle on this guy? They have unsupported volts. The stakes aren't there. These calves should be charging the volts. Dragoons are chasing these guys. So, yeah. Actually, I have an idea. I want to show you something. Hold on. Just wait 1 second. This is a thing that Point Man used to do. In fact, he used to make videos of this, is where you zoom out as far as you can, and you just kind of watch the game in terms of where the flags are. And one thing that we noticed, and this is when Napoleon was kind of just released, and we were still learning the game and the tactics and all the things that all you youngsters take for granted, we were still discovering, right? And one thing that we noticed when we watched games from this perspective is the player that just kind of had more flags in one place generally won, right? Duh. Well, that was actually kind of a pretty big experiment or discovery for us at the time. And this is back in the days of the British Small Arms clan, when Huntsman was still getting, really formed and everything. And again, we were learning tactics like how to properly position militia, like, oh, you should actually pull your lancers out. Rifles suck. We had to learn all these things the hard way. And one of the ways that we did that is we watched our replays a lot. We did a lot of experimental games where I'd walk one unit of rifles and you'd walk a unit of regular lights in. We'd see who shot it out. We would experiment with all these things. And one thing that we would do is watch games from this perspective. And so this is the movement of the Young Guard and the Swiss down, which kind of kickstarts the whole shenanigans. And so again, we have, 3 line of tree. You're going to watch Denmark shift units from this area over is one thing you're going to see. So there goes some more. But you're not going to see too many units from here move over. And over time, there are going to be more red flags here than tricolor flags. And if you watch enough games from this perspective, you get the feeling that while, small micro stuff, you have to do it, in the end, between 2 equal players, it's almost like the better meta positioning winds up determining the game more often than not. Right? And if you watched 100 games like this and sort of took notes on what was going on, you'd be like, we'd pause the game and draw our imaginary line and count the flags and be like, oh, that person had more people there. Where the fight is happening. So this is irrelevant because there's no fight happening, right? So we'd look at this and we'd say, that's interesting. There's a fight going on and there's more red flags. Who wins, right? That's kind of your big picture answer. And one of the things I noticed is if you watch the 2 previous games we did on the tournament games, we could watch these from this perspective and see exactly the same thing. And generally, all of the engagements in both of those 2 games, just one player had more flags there. And so that player won. And this is where the game breaks, because that's where the Swiss routes, and here's the Young Guard. And this is the Danish move up the field. This is the part where Denmark's up 15-12, I think. We still haven't done anything. We haven't even attempted to dictate the terms of the game with 65% of French army, I think, is the deal. Hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's a real weird clump. I wonder what's going on there. I mean, we could zoom in, right? We could do that. But we want to watch it from this perspective. And I think it's pretty clear at this point that Denmark's going to take this. They have a numbers advantage and they are advancing, right? So what do I think? Obviously, number one is this big picture and that engagement on the right. There's just more Danish flags. That's number one. Number two, I would half our army just wasn't active, right? Number three, as I'm trying to zoom in a little bit, we really needed to see a straight line at some point. We could have explored using the flank a little bit better, especially with our shooter cav. The shooting aspect of the shooter cav was not really used. Maybe one or two times they got a volley off that was relevant. This game changes character dramatically if Vago is active with the shooter cav in the rear. And then you combine that with moving some infantry. I think it favors Vago to fight on the flat of the map. So that just in an instant changes what the Danish player is willing to commit to the right. I think back to my comment, if there's 2 or 3 shooter calves sitting right over here, the game just becomes a lot different. Generally, we want to be moving and active on multiple areas of the field at the same time. In fact, generally, we just want to be more active. This is kind of like I prefer playing grassy games because the more active player usually wins. And that's really good training. If you just play these terrain maps and you're both really passive and you're both willing to move only 1 or 2 units at a time, you're introducing a ton of variance into the game, right? Because whoever's just the coin flips on accuracy or better is going to have a huge advantage. But if we're playing on grassy and I'm putting my cav behind you and I'm getting 2-on-1s everywhere, then the variance goes down a lot because I'm not relying on accuracy coin flips. I'm just straight up outplaying you and I'm going to win, right? So I think players that grow up just playing terrain, their skill set isn't round enough. Trip Hammer always used to say, he's a really smart guy, Trip Hammer always used to say that you have to learn the game on grassy, right? And then you go play terrain maps. And I think what he was getting at is that you have to learn tactics on grassy and then you learn strategy on the terrain maps. And it's very true. And I can see it in all these tournament games that I'm watching on the terrain maps. Players just aren't capable of moving at multiple places at the same time. The reason that Alesia really killed it in the Austrian Pinnacles game is he was moving more than his opponent. In fact, it'd be interesting to go rewatch that game and just kind of keep a running tally somehow of units Alesia is moving currently, units opponent is moving currently, and Alesia would be ahead virtually the entire length of that game, I think. So I think it's interesting to take all these big meta issue kind of things and then distill those and like, okay, yeah, that player lost, and I think those are relevant. Some super micro-y things. Check the line of sight on your unit so that they're not shooting into the dirt. Again, super nitpicky things. We gave away some cav damage. I do agree with you, Vago, that incident where the Lancers didn't connect was really weird. I don't think the opponent was cheating or anything. I think that was just really weird timing of where the pathing of the Lancer was going and when the move order for the line unit kicked in. I do agree that you were super unlucky there, and it would have been nice to get a good hit with the Lancer. But, shenanigans. At any rate, I'm not sure how productive that cav charge would have been because both your units were hitting that lifeguard. Your best case scenario is you're trading 2 cav for the lifeguard. Like say you get the route. Both your units were trapped back in their line and you had, I think, 2 infantry units shooting at your cav. So you're still going to lose your cav in that instance. I think I don't think you're actually going to route the lifeguard with that, but maybe get them down to, I don't know, 30 or 40 or something like that. So yeah, you lost out on some potential damage, but I don't think it's necessarily game-changing damage, would be my comment. And yeah, kind of over here. Kind of over. So I want to say again, Yayo Vago, really sorry about getting your name wrong in that last game. Felt like a chump. I of course I blame Amber. It easily. Who should be blamed? Clearly, who should be blamed for that? Again, thanks for sending the replay. I love doing these like educational, I'm looking for tips videos. I love it when players like have the mindfulness to be like, I need, I need to do this better. And I love that just approach that you want to learn and get better and analyze your mistakes, because that's hard and not many people can do that. So good luck to you, my friend. GG, send me another replay sometime. I'd love to do it. Good job. I have no idea what part of that is actually your name, Sunlu. Maybe it's Sunlu. So Vago, thanks again for playing. Good luck at the tournament. I haven't looked at the bracket. For all I know, you're out. For all I know, you could have already won it. So that's great. Just one last reminder, in continuing news, Amber hosts tournaments. Once again, I'll put a link to it in the comments. Go over and do it. It's free. And she's a great tournament host. Might have get to play against her because she plays in her own tournaments for some reason. So I hope that helps a little bit. My name is Jay Martin. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.